And hello again, boys and girls. Welcome back to the channel. Did you miss me? I think you did. I know it's been a long time since I did any recording for the channel or anything like that. It has been quite a quiet period, and I've been away at work doing bits and bobs, so I haven't been able to actually stream or record anything. I do know that, of course, that the new Company of Heroes is out. I have been playing a bit of that. We'll probably do a couple of streams of that game. Instead of actual recordings or videos of it, just a couple of streams because the multiplayer is, of course, where the game is at. And of course, the new the Great War Western Front is out, which of course is a RTS sort of turn-based grand strategy game as well, where you either play as the Central Powers or the Allied powers on the Western Front. I've played quite a few campaigns of this already, preparing for sort of the game/review of this game. And it is okay, really. I would give it a 6 out of 10, but because of its setting and its unique sort of attempt at First World War gameplay, it actually probably brings it up to really a 7 out of 10. It has a few game mechanics I don't particularly agree with and seem a bit weird, and its late game's a bit unbalanced. But its heart is there, the attempt is there, it just has a bit of a weak landing. But we'll go into more details about that at a later date. Anyway, we'll begin our campaign, where of course I will play as the Allied nations. And we'll play in 1914 under soldier difficulty, which is of course medium difficulty. I don't know if I can read this without time running out, but we will see. I probably could have read this if I read fast. In any case, I suppose we'll do a bit of a history lesson as well. So the game is supposed to simulate the sort of changing conditions of the First World War. But, well, actually I can't go into more detail because, of course, we're going to have a little cinematic in a second. So let's take a look at our cinematic.
With the death of the Archduke, Europe is propelled into chaos. Nations honoring treaties and alliances forged years before are now plunged into a conflict they cannot avoid. Sparked.
That's the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, I believe. That was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which of course starts the Great War.
Here on the Western Front, nations draw their battle lines. The Central Powers of Austria-Hungary and Germany now face the combined alliance of France, Britain, and their colonies. The Great War is about to begin.
General, sir, we have word from General Haig. The BEF.
I think General Haig only really comes to the fore in 1916. I don't know if General Haig's in charge in 1914. I don't think he is. So Kitchener's in charge, and then oh no, I think Haig does carry on throughout most of the Western Front. No, I think that's right.
Stand up to their quantity, caliber, or range.
Our counter-offensive had them pushed back from the Marne. What of our efforts to encircle them?
They have the higher ground here, sir.
What of the French?
We have retaken the eastern tip of Chemin-Tétane, but further progress has been negligible. We are at an impasse out there, I'm afraid.
Send word to our men to entrench also.
Sir, I fear we may not have the experience for this type of warfare.
That's correct. Trench warfare was a novel concept.
Over from England, we cannot risk another retreat like at Mons. It looks like we'll be settling in for the long haul. We must push back into Belgium. If we don't outflank the enemy, then we will be at a stalemate.
Thus the Western Front was established. From the fields of Flanders to the borders of Switzerland, the great nations would make their stand. The fate of millions was now in the hands of a few.
So, Allied campaign 1914. Germany pushed into Belgium and France. The Allies attempted to cut them off by pushing their forces north. Germany followed suit, each attempting to outflank each other in what was known as the Race to the Sea, a race neither side won. Blocked in both directions, the two factions dug in and tried to gain any ground they could. In an unparalleled act of humanity, British and German forces agreed to cease fire on Christmas Day. Both sides entered no man's land to exchange gifts and start up a game of football. Others took the time to rest, repair their trenches and recover the dead. This act of compassion was never repeated for the remainder of the war. Soon after the event, orders came down, push forward, take new ground and defeat the enemy. So here we are, we start on the main campaign map, which is of course of France and North Belgium, or West Belgium. You can see here on our bottom left we have money, which we can use to buy special units and also change the supply. And we have supply. And supply is what is used and what is slowly fed into each tile with certain supply depot upgrades to allow you to build or recruit more troops or actually use artillery call-ins. We see here that this has already got a local supply pool, and then each battle causes our global supply to be fed into that pool, which we can increase as time goes on, which will then allow us for larger engagements and so on and so forth. We also, of course, got our research, so we start with pretty much no research, with logistics allowing us to get more supply, allowing us for larger bombardments and greater battles with more troops. We have our defensive trench network, engineering for, of course, our artillery and gas, and our infantry troops, and of course our humble tank in 1916 if we rush it. Of course we've got air, which I've already used in Intel as well. So the game is really defined by its use of national will. So if the game really is won by inches, each battle you may not actually take the tile, you just may inflict casualties, and depending on how many casualties or how much ground you take, you will lower the national will of your opponent. And it's really just a grind across this front. You're unlikely to get to Paris or unlikely to get to Kruznek without that sort of, because of the nature of the warfare. But just progressively as you continue to fight, the national will declines, and as long as you do inflict more casualties upon the enemy and take minor gains, you will hopefully win the campaign. So far on Soldier difficulty, I've had very little difficulty winning the campaign, and I think this is the first sort of hiccup of the game, is that you could play entirely defensive the entire campaign and win just by sheer defensive battles, where in reality, if you were to LARP, actually it was on the British sort of onus, on the Allied sort of onus to push forward, and the Germans' onus to really sort of push forward in late 1915 to 1916-17. That's the sort of big issue with the game right now, is that there's no real reason to actually be aggressive. You can just wait for the enemy to come to you and use the supremacy of the defense to win. And I think they could have fixed that with, of course, more sort of missions that had alt-historical impacts. So, for example, if, of course, you did take Lille or you did push in the north, after a certain mission, it may reduce national morale and also potentially make it easier for the Italians off map to succeed on their campaign. And then, of course, if that succeeded, then the Germans would get less troops, or the Eastern Front would survive for a bit longer, and that would allow more troops to come in, less troops to come in onto the Western Front. That's the sort of the big first issue of the game. Although the concept is fine, the big problem right now is that there's no real reason to be aggressive, and it then results in the sort of the meta of just holding the line as in World War I, which is of course historically accurate to supremacy defense, but also it means quite a dull game where you can pretty much just win defensively and then auto-resolve most of the battles. At the same time, you have these stars, so even if you do sweep the enemy territory, the enemy only loses one star. If he loses both stars, then he loses that tile. This means that sometimes it can feel a bit tedious having to fight the same battle twice on the same map, even though you've completely crushed the enemy. I think they should probably do away with the star system, because I don't think the star system is conducive to actually being successful. Of course, historically you didn't have these massive pushes, but early on in the game, in terms of technology and that, you won't be achieving massive success anyway. So I don't think the star system was a particularly useful technique, because it just means that it just slows down the game. And we'll also go into some more details about other big issues. Of course, we get more troops if we can bring in. So we can bring in the Canadians, which of course we can bring up north. And we can bring in the French from the south. So if we bring the French in, make sure that sound's not too loud. It's not, that's good. So we bring the French in, so we can bring our French troops up to reinforce. And it's pretty much like a turn-based tile system until you get to the main battle itself. So I generally try and get at least 3 troops on each tile. And then I'll try and research supplies, reinforcements and money, because then of course that allows me to bring more troops in. So what to send my troops to? This is all pretty well secured. We've got 3 tiles there, 2 tiles there, so we send 1 troop there. And of course you do get missions, but I feel like as it stands, the missions you don't really have to do. There should perhaps be more of an onus that these missions can result in something, potentially weakening the enemy or giving you a reason to be aggressive. So for example, if you don't push a certain amount of tiles as the allies in Belgium for within a certain time limit, then of course you get a massive hit to national will, or you have the risk of the French completely surrendering or mutinying or surrendering if they take too many casualties. The mission system is supposed to make you do something, make you go on the offensive, make you lose men. But unfortunately, the mission system really doesn't give you any reason to do anything. There's no sort of incentive to actually LARP. And so unless you're LARPing as the Allies, the most optimal way to play is to do nothing. And as the Germans, unless you're LARPing, again, the most optimal way to play is to do nothing until, say, 1917, where you can then push. Of course, I do like the research system. The research system is really good because it shows you that sort of learning curve. A big concept in the Great War is the idea of learning curve and learning how to beat entrenched troops and beat that trench warfare. And of course, as you begin to research, you unlock things such as snipers, flamethrower troops, assault troops, gas and tanks, which of course were all sort of used to break through and achieve success in the Great War. And so initially you do feel it is like very much a futile brute force attempt to break through the enemy lines, but as time progresses and technology improves, then suddenly it becomes an entirely different kettle of fish. So you can see here you can get different things such as airfields allow you to deploy air troops, reconnaissance and supply depots. I generally try and upgrade supply depots because what this does is then this allows you to bring in more troops later on into the game. And what I mean by that is I mean that it allows you to, of course, do more artillery barrages, and more artillery barrages obviously gives you more of the ability to wear down the enemy and so on and so forth. So the first thing I do is generally start upgrading my supplies, because that means I can build more trenches and so on and so forth. So that's, of course, our main goal early on. So we can either end our turn, but I think we'll start with a battle, and I think we're going to try and take Lille first. I try always pushing the north and defending the south, just because I like to LARP as a British. Another good concept is the AI. Unlike other games such as Total War, the AI doesn't cheat too badly. The difficulty only changes sort of the enemy troops' sort of combat ability. The AI will have sort of the same amount of resources and supplies you do, which means that if you do win attritional battles and containment, it may mean the enemy will have to wait several turns until they've built up their supply for their own engagements. This has its pros and cons. The pros is you feel like you are having a good impact in this attritional warfare, because of course if you do succeed in bleeding the enemy, then of course you slowly start to take advantage as they begin to have diminishing returns in their money and supply. The cons of this is of course that once you do start to bleed the enemy, it does become a bit too easy to resolve to the end, and so perhaps there may need to be changes to the AI in terms of a supply and so on and so forth. I do believe there was also a contentious update to the AI because quote unquote it was too good or it cheated, which effectively meant that the AI just really knew how to micro extremely well and break through your defenses, and they nerfed the AI quite a bit, which I don't think the game needed. The AI was perfectly good as it is, but I like how the game is fair. I like how the AI is the developers were competent enough to make it so the AI didn't have to cheat to prove a challenge. In any case, we'll begin our first attack on Lille. You can see here we will achieve a victory, apparently, according to our auto-resolve. And so most of the time, a victory will not lower the tile. It just means you'll inflict more damage. So you won't actually take Lille with a victory. You will simply just bleed the enemy a little bit. If you want to actually take the tile, you've got to achieve something called clean sweep, which is taking the entirety of the map, which is actually very difficult to do, and taking it twice can make it very repetitive towards the end of the game. You can see we have our core supply, our max supply draw, meaning how much supply we can take from the global supply, and the total available supply. So if you don't have a lot of supply, you don't really want to engage because it means you'll run out of artillery too quickly. But if you have built up a large amount of supply, it leaves that sort of historical building up of forces before you went for these mass engagements. Thought to be inhabited as early as 2000 BC, Lille spent most of its life under siege from various factions, including both world wars. and blizzard condition, meaning that of course it can be very difficult to get shot at, but also very difficult for artillery to actually do anything. I do like how the terrain does impact the effect of your artillery and so on and so forth. Of course, we also have light cannons and heavy cannons, but we'll go into more detail about that after. So here we have our campaign map. So here we have no man's land, and we have the enemy entrenchments. You can see early on there's not a lot of enemy trenches because it's still early in the war and the digging in hasn't occurred yet. But as the game progresses, you're going to see larger and more complex trench networks, so bear that in mind. You can see here we have on the bottom left our ability to build trenches. So I generally like to build some trenches where the capture points are. And this is where the big impact of the game, the strategy comes in, is that how you build your defensive networks. You've got to build your defensive networks so you've got defense in depth, but also it's not too close to the artillery. You could have overlapping arcs of fire and other sort of things that help you in your engagement. So in this case, we want to build up, say here, and that should be pretty good for us. Of course, we don't want to use too much of our supply building up these artillery, these positions, because we're going to need our supply for the actual main engagement itself. We can also deploy things such as recon balloons that allow us to spot the enemy positions. We can build machine guns, which are very powerful, and heavy artillery and light artillery pieces. So right now the meta of the game is to use light artillery because it has a wider arc of fire, which means that it can suppress the enemy quicker. Now, being a historian, I dislike that concept. Really, light artillery was extremely ineffective once going towards the trench warfare. And that's because the Allied light artillery was very small caliber. And because of its small caliber, it didn't do a lot of damage to enemy defensive networks or enemy trenches. And a lot of the time, they had like the 75mm, which were really more sort of direct fire sort of weapons. Now, when you compare that, say, to German artillery pieces and heavy artillery pieces, which were the mainstay of trench warfare, you'd think the heavy artillery pieces would be more effective, but because of the nature of the game, they failed to do this. You see, heavy artillery is great at destroying entrenched enemy positions, but it is really bad at suppressing the enemy, and you need to suppress the enemy to get into the trenches, whereas light artillery pieces are very good at suppressing the enemy and destroying the enemy out of cover. So what generally happens is you end up having to, well, you effectively spam light artillery, and that's simply because light artillery is better, which is a bit of a shame. So using our entrenchments, we can then start to build up a defensive network. So I generally like to build as many of these as possible so we don't get any back caps, and then I try and put more trenches down where the enemy can, of course. Well, I want to do my main assault because of course that's where the troops spawn initially, so I wanted to do that. Of course, each troop has their own ability, so the Belgian infantry are unbreakable, so they don't take a lot of morale damage, whereas the French infantry are cheaper. And so again, you've got to balance out. Again, I haven't really noticed it being that too much of a game-breaking or necessary sort of thing, but it's still nice to have that each unit has its own abilities. I'm going to have to move you, so I build my artillery network a bit better, my trench network a bit better. So I'm trying to build a sort of double defense in depth. I will build command trenches later on after the battle continues. So now we built up our troops. Now, what I really liked about this game is that it slowly brings you into this mindset of a Great War general. So, a big controversy with the Great War was how generals used their troops, just throwing them in these sort of suicidal mass charges just to win, just to take inches of land. And it very much, you get that sensation in this game. You can lose 10 divisions, 10,000 troops, or 3,000 troops, and feel absolutely nothing as a commander or as a player who is a commander, because you've taken a tiny bit of territory, which will of course be deemed as a tactical success, which means that you almost horrifyingly, you do end up taking the mindset of a commander in the Great War, just throwing troops at entrenched networks, watching them get mowed down, but completely ambivalent to the collapse, because these troops will be reinforced next battle, and so you don't really consider or think about preserving your troops. You just simply throw them and see if the mass overwhelms, which can which I liked and also dislike. I dislike on an ethical level, but I like it from an historical level because it does have this sort of idea of lions led by donkeys, where of course your Great War generals did throw troops at these trying to wear down enemy lines, and the loss or numbers of lost were almost irrelevant. But anyway, let's begin our battle. So first thing we do, I have got rid of my observation balloon, so that's going to be a problem because normally I use my observation balloon to blow up enemy entrenched works. But you can see the enemy has put, or the Germans have put down more trenches on the left and the right. You can see that's sort of an inverse trench, and as the game progresses, what I also like about this game, you can see right now is quite a clean map. As the game progresses and the years progresses, you're going to see more and more damage to the terrain. You can see more mud, the trenches are going to look worse, there's going to be more sort of debris, and the trench network's going to look massive and elaborate, which I really like. What I dislike about the game is the fact that there is no persistence in what territory you take. So for example, if I take Objective Yankee, this map, and then ceasefire, I will not keep Objective Yankee on the next battle when I fight here again. This is silly because of course you think that if you took the trenches you try and hold them, and you can perhaps come up with the excuse that maybe you withdraw afterwards, but actually it's more likely that the Allied troops or enemy troops would have dug in on the captured territory, and so it can be a bit irritating. Oh, hello. You can see how that's not how this game is going to go. You can see how this game is going to go, but I find it quite irritating. Now, potentially they could do a tech called bite and hold, because in 1917, they under sort of Plume at the Passchendaele, they did come up with the idea of biting and holding territory. That means that you persistently hold objectives as the game progresses, but actually, honestly, it shouldn't be necessary. Really, if I take Y this map, then I should keep Y for the rest into the next map. In the next battle, which I think is silly. Of course, we can do preparatory bombardments of our supply, and of course we can begin massacring our troops. So, this is effectively the game.
Stand by for orders. On the line, need to hold this position. Ready yourselves. The brass wants this piece of ground. Attention, take firing positions.
And then we use artillery to suppress, and we just charge the troops in trying to take the objective. Then your troops will be mown down, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you've just got to charge to try and take the enemy trench line. Any casualties, you just send more in. Until you run out of supply or you run out of men.
We have your orders. Fire step.
And then you see the enemy fighting the trenches. It is a bit gamey, so you they won't fight when moving amongst themselves, but effectively they move into the trench and then they fight. And so sometimes you have this weird sort of scenario, you see German troops and French troops just running past each other. Of course, as the game progresses, you unlock siege artillery, and it has limited use, sadly. You would hope to see more of its use, but it's so expensive, and the damage it inflicts is actually not that good. charging the French in the column of attack, which is not a good idea. So use the light artillery to suppress, which I think the heavy artillery should do. I think the light artillery should be extremely ineffective on entrenched positions, but hey ho, I'm not going to be too upset. And you take the position. Of course, early 1915 is still not too bad, but once you start seeing enemy machine guns, masses of enemy troops, that's when the pain begins to really take hold. Of course, we can withdraw our troops. That means that we don't have to cost, as long as they don't get destroyed, we don't have to pay to replace them afterwards. So we can withdraw our troops now because they've been somewhat damaged and mauled, and bring in reinforcements now. And by taking this position, we've achieved a notional success, which means this will now be seen as a minor victory because of our glorious push on this position, which says a lot.
Ready yourselves.
You do have to be a bit wary about these columns as well, because of course enemy artillery, if it spots you, will just annihilate your columns. And of course, what I do like is you're seeing this now and thinking this is a bit meh. You just like, you right click, watch your troops get massed, and you're right, but that is the Great War. And of course, as the game goes on, it becomes more complex. The use of smoke, the use of heavy siege batteries, the use of trench raiders, the use of tanks that completely change this sort of attritional warfare. I mean, I would say tanks are a little bit OP in this game. The reason why the tanks are OP in this game is because they don't suffer from sort of failures. I think I don't remember the Battle of Cambrai. I think of like the 400 tanks or so that were used, about 17 survived at the end of it, and there were some case studies where like there would be 100 tanks and only 10 would actually get to the jumping off point because they all had mechanical failures. Unfortunately, mechanical failures are not taken into account in this game, which I think is a bit silly, because otherwise tanks are disgustingly overpowered, and as they are disgustingly overpowered in this game, you just spam tanks and completely invalidate the enemy positions. Again, I understand why they've done this. It perhaps wouldn't be particularly fun to watch tanks be particularly massive tanks just fail, but there is some balancing issues with the game which I can't really abide by, and that in this case it is things such as tanks. And I have yet to use gas because I've just found that siege artillery and resource spamming is actually more effective. But with this position taken, we can now move to our next position, which will be, of course, the X position, simply because, or X-ray, because Zulu is out of our range, and you see those trenches can be rather difficult to push. So we then take our troops, and once again, mass them up for round 2.
Stand by for orders. Ready yourselves. Get in position.
And watch the brutality unfold. So where does the actual strategy come in? Well, the strategy comes in the correct use of artillery, and of course the setting up of trenches and how you maneuver in those trenches. It's very macro, I will say that, simply because you can't micromanage all these troops, and because they're so easy to be obliterated, you can't really micro very well. See, enemy machine gun, that's going to mow us down. I'm going to send the next wave. Unfortunately, our troops got suppressed as well.
Attention! Ready on the line!
On a de nouveaux ordres. Mettez-vous en position.
Leg je wapens neer.
Préparez-vous sur la ligne.
Have your orders!
On est arrivé. On attend les ordres.
We surrender!
Allemaal, vel voor niet en bepaald. Jullie posities in.
Have your orders! Put your weapons down!
And then we fight in the trenches once more.
Positions! Full withdraw!
Wacht op orders.
And once again,
Confrontatie
as you
vooraf.
do,
Houd jullie klaar. Bereid je voor.
we prepare for the next assault wave.
Vijand vuur.
Teams klaar. Richten spervuur. Positie klaar, jongens. Klaar om te vuren.
See, the artillery is slowly suppressing them with the X symbol.
We hebben nieuwe orders. We hebben nieuwe orders. Wacht op orders. Klaar om te vuren. Bereid je voor. Kunnen we niet winnen. Opgelet. Neem jullie posities in.
On est arrivé. On attend les ordres. Au rapport.
We hebben nieuwe orders. Houd jullie klaar.
Attention. Feu à volonté.
We hebben nieuwe orders. Wacht op orders. Allemaal, jongens.
Orders voor de spervuur.
Once your troops get within range, they can start knocking out the artillery with grenades.
Bereid je voor. Klaar om te vuren. We geven ons over. Wat zijn uw orders?
On doit tenir cette position.
Opgelet. We
I tend to find defensive missions much more enjoyable, simply because, as you can probably tell by the nature of the early game,
Attendez les
a lot of it is just watching troops get brutalized.
On est arrivé. On attend les ordres. Attendez les ordres.
terugtrekken. Iedereen. We hebben nieuwe orders. Volledige terugtrekking. Versterkingen melden zich.
And by taking this objective, we hopefully turn it more into our favour. Alas, I don't think my artillery will be able to reach the final point. This is where you got to start using common sense and going, okay, let's probably halt our offensive now.
Formez les rangs. On tient cette position.
Perhaps we can push him from
Cette
the flanks
position est
though.
à nous.
Tenez-vous prêts. Sur la ligne.
Attention. On doit tenir cette position. Sur la ligne.
Houd jullie klaar, jongens. Voor intens spervuur.
Hij is de witte vlag.
Klaar om te vuren. Richten stierpositie. Start het spervuur.
On a de nouveaux ordres.
Attendez les ordres sur la ligne. Versterkingen klaar.
On a de nouveaux ordres.
And of course, if you do order your troops to move when in a trench, they will actually move through the trench network. They won't just like step outside of it unless they absolutely have to, which means that you don't have to worry too much about troops getting annihilated outside the trenches. You can see the enemy starting to move through the trench network. Or,
We hebben nieuwe orders. Verspreiden voor confrontatie.
Levez le drapeau blanc.
Klaar om te vuren. Op die locatie. Laden maar. Vel voor start en spervuur. Neem jullie posities in. Alle geschützeenheden. Vuur.
Het feest is precies al bezig. Wacht op orders. Neem jullie posities in.
Attention. Mettez-vous en position.
and here's the enemy command trench. If you take command trench, it acts like a big victory point. Again, doesn't actually mean you win the map though. You've got to take every single point to achieve a clean sweep, so to speak.
Opgelet. Verspreiden. Wapens in de aanslag. We hebben nieuwe orders.
Mission is up. Let arrivé. Alles zorgen. Teams klaar. Toezicht bepaald. We zijn klaar, jongens. Vuur. On a de nouveaux ordres sur la banquette de tir. On a de nouveaux ordres. Attendez les ordres. Sur la ligne. Tenez-vous prêts.
Get in.
We hebben nieuwe
Knock these guys out. Of course, you can destroy enemy trenches with siege works later on. With siege artillery, but you need to mass it, and it's very much a resource hog. I sometimes find that you'd think siege artillery would be more effective than it actually is,
Wacht op orders. Klaar om te
because
vuren.
sometimes you could do like a 15-day bombardment and knock out like 3 trenches. And actually, I think it's a bit counterproductive. So hard researching siege artillery is perhaps not the most optimal, which is again a bit depressing because although siege artillery looks great on the battlefield and I enjoy watching the pre-bombardment, it's just a bit meh by the fact that you can't actually. It looks great, but actually isn't that great, if you know what I mean. It doesn't have that real good impact. But you can probably tell the mindset I'm having in this game. Just the sheer throwing of troops in these mass engagements.
We hebben nieuwe orders.
So what's happening is I'm ordering the troops into the trenches, and what this means is that my troops will now fight, and whoever wins will then capture the point.
Wacht op orders.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Préparez-vous sur la banquette de tir. Attendez les ordres.
Bereid je voor. Vertrek.
Tenez-vous prêts. Allez, on accélère.
Let's order the Finchies back.
Tout le monde, retraite. Versterkingen melden
On
zich.
arrive après la bataille, on dirait.
And we can finish this off by destroying artillery pieces, which will cost quite a bit of supply for the enemy.
Versterkingen klaar. Opgelet. Kies je doel zorgvuldig.
I'm just going to try and push into this final trench with 4 minutes left to go. Don't know if we'll manage it or not.
We hebben nieuwe orders.
Did enemy bring in reinforcements?
We hebben nieuwe orders. Vuur naar believen.
On a de nouveaux ordres.
Sadly, my artillery is not in range.
Wacht op orders. We vertrekken. Opschieten.
Taking a while right now because I haven't researched the damage modifiers yet, but give it time.
Bereid je voor. We moeten vertrekken.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Préparez-vous à recevoir des tirs.
Yeah, the command trench doesn't actually mean anything. You won't hold a command trench. It just means you get more points in your victory timer.
We hebben nieuwe orders. Deze positie is van ons.
And so we do our final push with what's left of the army. I mean, it looks cool. It just feels awful. It's one of those games, like most strategy games teach you to conserve your weapons, conserve your troops. This strategy game is the opposite. It's throw everything you've got en masse at the target and hopefully use your artillery to win.
We moeten deze positie vasthouden. Wapens in de aanslag.
And just run through your own artillery. Historically accurate.
Wacht op orders.
What do you call it? Creeping barrage. Sometimes the creeping barrages would come down directly on top of your own troops. Why? Because it'd rather have the creeping barrage too close to your troops than too far away from your troops. Because of course, if your creeping barrage over was too fast, then it wouldn't have the good enough impact of actually covering your troops' advance.
Hij is de witte orders. Leg je wapens neer. Het feestje is precies al bezig. Ik kan hem niet winnen.
See, now that my artillery is out of range, the actual impact, well, my troop is getting mown down basically. I mean, I could say something else, but like a lot of the lessons other strategy games teach you, move your troops up carefully, don't throw them in like buffoons. You just ignore. Alas, I don't think I'm going to have time to break through any further. Only got 1 minute, so I'll call a ceasefire here. And that ends the engagement. And all that territory you've just taken will now be gone, because that's the really irritating thing, is that you'd think that you'd keep the territory you've just taken, but nope. Next campaign, same map, starting from scratch again, which is really annoying. So, because of this victory, it means that the enemy doesn't lose a star. He keeps a star, so he won't lose that tile. But because you achieved a quote-unquote major victory, it means that they've lost 15 national will, whereas I've only lost 1. And it's also cost them 1,042 gold coin or currency, and so it cost me 1,000 euro. That's quite a costly offensive, so that's why when you see these mass offensive, normally you'd have 1 or 2 turns of stopping before you move forward any further. And of course, depending on how well you've achieved, or what you achieve, you get extra more supply, or perhaps more, I don't even know what that is. And no doubt, perhaps there's a better way of taking it, but I don't think there is. I think this is how the early war is supposed to go. So you see, I get +1 national will, then we loses 14, and the map doesn't change. Like nothing changes. We continue to be like this, simply because we haven't taken all the enemy territory, and we've lost all the territory we've just taken. That's the worst part of the game. They need to fix that. Really, if I take, I mean, maybe they can give back the command trench to the enemy AI, but the fact is, if I take a point, I should be able to hold it next battle. That's really the most irritating part about this game. So there's some delivery here which just isn't that good. So I get 1,200 gold next turn and a research point, and I get cash poor because I pretty much ran out of gold last time. So this is where that sort of building up of troops occurs now, where you don't really want to advance anymore because of how costly it is. Now you can see the enemy is reinforced, and I don't think I'm going to do an offensive to this time because of how many troops there is and the lack of money I've got. So what I'll do now is I'll wait, see what the enemy does, and go accordingly. But sometimes that means that you don't actually want to attack on parts of the front where you've got the most troops. Maybe you want to attack in the south, or the east, or the west. But I generally try and attack where I've got the largest concentration of troops. So you get different events. These events you can more or less ignore, like the British blockade. Again, historically, the British blockaded the Germans, started to starve them out, leading to the Battle of Jutland, which the British won, and led to the Germans eventually scuppering their ships. So again, history lesson. British biggest navy in the world at this time. They of course blockade the Germans and prevent them from getting grain and food and material and all that sort of stuff. Of course, this leads to the Germans, who've been building up their own army, their own navy, the Kriegsmarine, to move out with their navy to try and beat the British, leading to the Battle of Jutland, which was a weird sort of battle with initially the Germans advancing, then turn around and running away, and then it just leads to sort of a draw/defeat for the Germans because they never try and do it again. And this eventual blockade does lead to the Germans really struggling and collapsing. So, similar to war, effectively this, what it says here, almost 400,000 deaths from starvation, disease are estimated to have been caused. So I get a mission that will give me 2 planes if I build it. I ignore the mission because there's no need for me to follow the missions. But you can see how repetitive this can become simply due to the nature of the campaign and the fact that now I could simply just do nothing because I've got the advantage. I can auto-resolve through this game now, unless I keep on getting major losses, which is unlikely. So their mission system should lead to influencing the outcome of the war, which sadly it doesn't. That would keep you more occupied. It'd lead you to actually being more proactive. Anyway, we'll fight a defensive battle, because even though it says major loss at Lunenburg, it will not be. But you see how the AI hasn't been attacking it until this point, because it's been building up its reserves. So still early game, it's still pretty competitive. But after a few catastrophic defeats, it will quickly begin to struggle in terms of actually being able to do anything. So we need to build our trench lines up. So I'm going to delete this trench line, delete this trench line. And I like to build my trench lines in depth. So 1, 2, 3. And then we want to build a trench line here. 1, 2. Oh. And then I need to build another one over here. Oh, this one's not too bad. Alas, my lack of supply means that I'm going to struggle to do too much here. But again, I'll try and build my defense in depth. Not too close, because the artillery position. This is where the strategy comes in, really, the building up of your trench networks, which are persistent throughout the game as long as you don't get any sort of major losses. And of course, your hardcore LARPers will be like, well, actually most trenches were in the zigzag network, and you'd be correct, but it's a game, so calm down. Then we get artillery pieces, which are extremely expensive, but were very powerful at slowing down enemy advances. And then we'll see how many French troops I can afford. I generally try not to crowd the front trenches.
Renfort, au rapport. Au rapport.
On arrive après le bataille, on dirait.
Renfort, au rapport. Renfort, prêt.
On est arrivé, on attend les ordres.
On est arrivé, on attend les ordres.
On est arrivé,
On arrive après la bataille, on dirait.
Au rapport.
Au rapport.
And maybe we can build a support trench here.
Tenez-vous prêts, en position de tir.
So early on, these are very weak trenches, and our trench network is not particularly elaborate because we just don't have enough supplies to dig in. Again, this historically sort of represents the early digging in. It's not going to be amazing at the moment, but of course, as time goes by, the trenches are persistent, and so gradually it's going to get more and more dug in, more elaborate use of trench wire, use of mortar positions, machine guns, and so on and so forth. However, the caveat to that is sadly that by the mid to late game, the AI is really struggling on a deficit unless you're playing like a potato. So we build our trench networks. Of course, I would like communication trenches to move forward and back, but I simply couldn't afford it because of lack of supply. I've only got 102 supplies, so I've got to be a bit careful that I do not lose too many troops. But I hope the enemy will give a ceasefire if they do try and push too aggressively. And no heavy artillery, because heavy artillery is smaller radius. This really gets on my nerves. The light artillery was garbage in trench warfare, so I don't. What irritates me is the fact that light artillery is more optimum than heavy artillery in the game, and the fact that siege artillery is an off map. Siege artillery, you should be able to have siege. Late game heavy artillery should be collapsing trenches and so on and so forth, just turning the place into a mess. So this is like almost like a building simulator as well, because of course you just want to keep fighting the same maps and building more and more trenches and so on and so forth. So that's also quite a caveat. Like, I like how as the game progresses, the map slowly changes and my defensive line becomes more and more elaborate. So we just have to wait for the enemy to mass its troops. I've only got 102 supplies, so I may have to surrender. I can't even surrender. I just have to cease fire because I don't want a clean sweep here. I want to bleed the enemy. And here's the enemy. They'll begin their advance. Hopefully my troops, yeah, will get multiple fire from this trench line. Oh, they're firing light artillery. Trying to weaken me. We'll fire our own light artillery in a second, but I can't fire too much because again I don't have enough shells. I have a shell shortage.
On a nos cibles. Chargez l'artillerie, tire le barrage de feu.
On a de nouveaux ordres.
They're breaking the line.
Attention. Attendez les ordres. Tenez-vous prêts. Préparez-vous sur la ligne. Sur la ligne.
And that's why we're building these second reserve lines now.
C'est perdu. Tenez-vous prêts. Attention. Préparez-vous à tirer. On a de nouveaux ordres.
The AI is pretty clever at trying to find weak spots.
Préparez-vous sur la ligne. On a de nouveaux ordres.
Try and conserve our troops so we'll draw the weakened units. Which was not particularly what the French did actually in the First World War, especially early on. They kept their troops. I mean, they did suffer some catastrophic defeats, losses early on, so you can understand why. But early on, they did not do what the British did and do troop turnaround. So what would happen with the British is they'd send some troops off to the front lines, they'd do some fighting, and then after like a couple of weeks they'd be sent back to the reserve lines, whereas the French didn't do that. There was no reserve line fund for the poor old French, not until really Marshal Pétain, which is quite sad what happens to Marshal Pétain. If you don't know who he was a famous French general in the First World War. Initially the French were getting hammered at Verdun, then Marshal Pétain takes over and sort of turns it around in terms of the use of lorries and motor vehicles, and also the ability to actually starting to rotate troops. Then of course eventually Marshal Pétain would be in charge of sort of the wider army as a whole, and during the sort of the mutinies it was sort of Marshal Pétain that sort of curbed the mutinies by his sort of practice of troop turnover, where of course I don't know if Pétain ever replaces Foch, or no, if Foch is ever replaced by Pétain, but what I do know is that Pétain was instrumental to actually trying to keep the French in the fight, because they were pretty fed up, really, pretty smashed up towards, because of Verdun and so on and so forth, in the early battles of the First World War. Of course, what would happen is eventually in the Second World War, Pétain would take over Vichy France, and he would be, after the war, I think, sent to a prison island, and his body was never interned back in France, which is very, very sad. Very, very sad. Of course, you could argue, well, that's what you get for, collaborating with the Germans. But again, he was under strict orders by the Republic, or for the French government to coalesce to the German demands after the fall of France. And so I just feel like he was a French hero who was very badly treated by the French politicians after the Second World War. But that's just a bit of trivia for you. So, because of excessive losses, the Germans have ceasefire, and that means that we end the battle. And of course, that also means that I technically win it because I inflicted more casualties from the enemy, and so I get a victory. Even though no territory has changed, which again is pretty historic accurate, and I take very little casualties. So you can see the meta here. The meta is just do nothing for most of the war, which you can do in this game because there's nothing stopping you from doing it. I don't know if the Germans, there's a greater pressure on you to actually go on the offensive, but I don't think there is. And you can see the casualties, 942 infantry of the French, about 5,000 German troops. You could also use bombers and that, but I've never actually bothered to use them. I think because of the supplies are so expensive. And once again, I'll apparently get a great loss here, fighting the Germans. I don't think I will. It's again Luneville. They can try again, fighting from all fronts. And this is where the game falls down. Whereas before the patch, I would argue the AI was smart enough to actually break through your defences and find your weak spots. Now it's a bit more blobby, and it's just going to take massive casualties now, and it's going to take it like 2 or 3 turns to actually get enough supply back to do any sort of offensive action. So new map, new pain, we've got to build up our new trench lines. Let's delete that. Let's delete that one. And that makes sense. Because it's quite a small map, I don't think I need that much of a rear defensive line. Oh yeah, apparently the cheese is to form the triangle network of trenches, which is disgustingly overpowered, and you're going to see now why it's so overpowered. So stand back, boys, it's going to get biblical in terms of casualties. Once again, artillery set up around about here and here, and hopefully we'll still have enough points.
Renfort au rapport. On est arrivé. On attend les ordres. Prêt. On arrive après le bataille. On est arrivé. On attend les ordres. Au rapport.
Luckily the French are cheap, which is great.
Renfort prêt.
Still no use of machine guns yet, simply because I can't afford it. I don't think the triangle trench strategy is that powerful, if I'm honest. I don't know why people say it is. Because I feel like one artillery piece is just going to stop me. I just about could afford enough troops. The German tank, well, the British tanks are disgustingly powerful. Like, the game completely just becomes a pushover towards late game, and that's because they haven't been able to historically represent the issues with tanks, which was the fact that they broke down horribly and had mass failure rates. I suppose it would be particularly fun to use the tanks if of 20 tanks or the 5 tanks you use, only 1 actually ever got towards the enemy, but it would make the game more accurate, which I do want. I understand there's going to be a limit, oh, that's not good, between historical accuracy and fun, but I would have liked it a great deal if the game had been more reflective of actual limitations of tanks. Still, in terms of how long each campaign lasts, it can last about 30 minutes if you just auto-resolve everything, but or it could last a couple of hours if you actually are trying to play properly and fight every map, which I recommend you do, because you get the most fun out of the game in terms of actually seeing the persistent growth of enemy trench lines and so on and so forth. And you can really LARP. Still, it's still far too early days to see the damage inflicted by the enemy, by the persistent damage and so on and so forth. Oh, there's random bodies here.
Attention.
Okay, and there is a field here, which is not good. I should have noticed that. That was bad strategy on my part. If a field or a forest conceals your movement, meaning that it's very easy for the enemy to now move forward. No, get out of the trenches. These sound effects are also pretty good, because it does sound like horror is going on. Like the music in that does sound like it's pretty much an absolute hellhole. Do I have a second trench line? No, I don't. I'd be tempted to abandon this trench line, but sort of made my peace now.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Retraite totale. On a de nouveaux ordres. On se replie. Tendez les ordres. Sur une ligne. Tenez-vous prêts. Position de tir. Attention. Tout le monde. Retraite.
Only one infantry squad can fire at a trench at each time, so you can switch which troops are firing by clicking the swap trench position.
Au rapport.
On a de nouveaux ordres.
Préparez-vous à recevoir les ordres de la mission. Ordre de tir de barrage, venez. Attendez les ordres.
We're going to struggle to hold this. To hold this front trench line simply because it's going to run out of supply. Still, pound for pounding, they lose more men than we are.
Position, tenez-vous prêts. Préparez-vous à tirer. C'est perdu.
On est arrivé. Attends les ordres.
Encore prêt. Tenez-vous prêts. Préparez-vous sur la ligne.
Go, go, go! In terms of actual effects, I would have liked to cost a bit more gore on that, but I understand by the masses of troops you can't go too over the top. And another complaint is the fact that bodies aren't persistent. If you're really going for the horrors of the Great War, you perhaps should have persistent bodies as well, so you can see the enemy body just disappeared. A big sort of
Tenez-vous prêts.
meh point.
Mettez-vous en position.
If you want to really bring out the true horrors of the Great War, then bodies should begin to
On a de nouveaux
coalesce.
ordres. Mettez-vous en position.
I can get 10 more divisions out. And I don't think I can use another artillery piece. I've only got 5. Okay, so I can use the artillery. I'd rather them have a ceasefire now than me have to send any more troops forward.
Chargez l'artillerie de barrage. Pilonnez cette position. Établissez les positions de barrage ordonnées. Commencez le barrage. I've
I've made a mistake of setting the trenches up here. they can move too far forward without me being able to actually shoot them. I may have bad in the first trenches.
On se replie.
They're going to jump over. I don't think it's going to work, my boys. Do you have enough artillery, do you, boys? Start sending some of the boys over here.
Attention. Le commandement de cette position.
On a de nouveaux ordres. C'est trop. Retraite. On se replie. On arrive après la bataille, on dirait.
You are correct, we have run out of supply. Well, if I'm running out of supply, they're going to be running out of supply as well.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Attention, dispersez-vous.
Attendez les ordres. En marche.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Accélère.
Repliez-vous.
On a de nouveaux ordres. En marche.
Repliez-vous. À couvert.
Attendez les ordres. Repliez-vous. À couvert.
Okay, I'm going to withdraw these guys back.
Préparez-vous sur la ligne. Attendez les ordres. En ligne.
This will be a minor defeat for us.
Le commandement veut cette position.
I can't forward anymore.
C'est trop. Retraite.
Casualties.
On doit tenir
Ah.
cette position. Le commandement veut cette position. Dispersez-vous sur la ligne. On tient. En position
Let's
de
march these
tir.
guys into their deaths.
Tenez-vous prêts. On tient.
Back to the command trench, boys.
Attention, on tient cette position.
Yep, I'm well aware about what's going on here. So you see that smaller arc, that's the heavy artillery. It does kill enemy troops, but it does no suppression. So it's not really what you recommend.
C'est perdu.
C'est attention. Défendez cette position de tir.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Préparez-vous à tirer.
Attention. En position de tir.
That's right, I've only got 9 more minutes to keep on succeeding.
Tenez cette position.
Yeah, I'll take that point.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Mettez-vous en position.
On a perdu le position.
Still better than a great loss. Can I throw any more troops over there? Nope.
Attendez les ordres. Préparez-vous sur la ligne.
Call a ceasefire. Don't want to do this anymore.
On a de nouveaux ordres. On a de nouveaux ordres.
Tenez-vous prêts sur la ligne.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Préparez-vous à tirer.
Attention,
On se replie.
cette position est à nous. De tir.
Yeah, they're going for it.
On a de nouveaux ordres. On tient. On tient cette position.
C'est trop. Retraite.
On se replie.
luckily, I think they've overdone it. Sadly, there's no experience or anything like that, so you won't get you won't get extremely elite troops, because just the nature of the game, you just so many people will be dying, it's not worth it.
Tenez-vous prêts. Feu à volonté. Cette position est à nous. Attention. On se replie. Repliez-vous. On a de nouveaux ordres. On a de nouveaux ordres. On avance. Préparez-vous à tirer.
See if I can counterattack and retake that trench line. Unlikely, but I can dream.
On a de nouveaux ordres. On avance.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Attendez les ordres. Position.
Come on, get in.
C'est perdu.
On a de nouveaux
On doit
ordres.
tenir cette position.
Attendez les ordres. Tenez-vous prêts. En marche. Le commandement veut cette
Le
position.
commandement veut cette position.
Okay, we've retaken the trench, that's great.
Tenez-vous prêts. Préparez-vous à tirer. On tient.
Stop bombing.
Mettez-vous en position.
I just ran out of everything else, that's the
Préparez-vous à
problem.
tirer. Tenez-vous prêts. Mettez-vous en position.
Attention. Feu à volonté.
No, my boys are suppressed.
Préparez-vous sur la ligne.
Attention.
On a de nouveaux ordres. On a de nouveaux ordres. En position de tir.
They're not going to stop, I don't think.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Préparez-vous sur la ligne.
Attendez les ordres. Préparez-vous à tirer.
Give me a ceasefire now, please.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Sur la ligne.
Please, give me a ceasefire. I've been bled. That's the, this is sort of the unique part of the game. It's all about the bleeding the enemy. You've got masses of troops. It's just, can you overcome the costliness of what you're doing? And in their case, yes, I can. Oh, that's did extremely well. I can't remember if that was a stalemate or not. Yeah, stalemate, so it's better than a great loss, but still. And now we've got reinforcements, so we can actually fix that problem and start sending boys over. So it was Lüneburg, that was one of the problems. One of the problem children we need to fix.
On y va.
I think it was just Lüneburg that attacked, wasn't it? Or was it Nancy as well? Well, they got 3 troops there, they got 3 troops there, they got 3 troops there. 3, 3,
Attention. On a de nouveaux ordres.
3. We'll start sending more troops over to
On a de
reinforce
nouveaux
this
ordres,
area.
allez.
They do like attacking Lüneburg for some strange reason, so
Attendez les ordres. Allez, on accélère.
they're just going to keep saving up money, so we'll constantly keep on upgrading that. until our next offensive occurs.
We have new
We'll send one troop
moving.
there, and then the rest
Stand
we'll
by
send
for orders. Need to
in the
go.
direction of Lille. Or not, because we actually sent the troops in the wrong direction. Okay, never mind. Death from below. Yep, so actually, historically speaking, the U-boats in the Great War sunk more tonnage than the U-boats in the Second World War, I believe. And actually, the U-boat campaign in the First World War was so effective, it was threatening the British to the point that a part of the actual operation in Passchendaele was trying to force the German U-boats out of Belgium because of the fear that the U-boats were being so effective that the British couldn't last any longer with that sort of U-boat warfare. Yet U-boats were actually extremely effective. So gas, we can research gas masks, but I've never needed to research gas masks in this game, so why on earth would you?
Attention.
So the only reason we're not engaging now is because I want to save a bit more for our next offences on Lille. And there's spies everywhere, don't worry about it. So sometimes I feel the research tree is pretty pointless. So like you could research depth and below and mining and mortars, but you don't need to. You could research gas, but there's no need to. Most of this, the only reason you're researching artillery is simply to get to tank warfare. The most powerful ones, I think, are logistics and, in fact, the research up here. So that gives me 1,200, that gives me extra 200 gold. We'll do that.
Ready yourself.
But now of our 2,600 and 2,300, we'll try and do another offensive to try and break into this territory. It says it's a major loss. The balancing system is Papega, don't worry about it. It's simply not correct. And this is the most depressing part. So we've already fought in Lille. We already took like 3 objectives, and now we're back to square one. We're going to lose all the territory we took last time, and that's a big problem with this game. The star system and this system is really frustrating. I wouldn't mind the star system if I actually kept the territory that I fought over. Also, for some strange reason, I lose a significant amount. Oh no, this is a different place we're attacking from. But it's just very frustrating, if you know what I mean. Like, you would hope... let's get rid of that. You'd think that territory you took would stay and be persistent. So we're not going to do too intelligent a defensive line this time. Simply because I don't think I'm going to need it. Put up our little balloon. So we'll try and take Z and Y. Objective Z and Y. So once again we'll mass artillery. Put them as close to the front as possible because of course we'll be using them. Sadly artillery is not persistent. You'd think artillery would be persistent as well, but sadly not. And then we'll see what troops. So we can use elite British infantry, which of course we'll use en masse.
Reporting for duty. Reinforcements reporting. Reinforcements ready. We have arrived and await orders. Looks like we're late to the party.
And then we'll put some crack troops over on the left side.
Reporting for duty.
Reporting for duty. Reinforcements reporting.
Reinforcements reporting. Reinforcements reporting.
Sadly no more artillery pieces, that's a shame. Oh, because I can't afford it because I put too many troops out. Let's get rid of this troop here. Let's try kind of a light artillery piece. So once again, we'll try and take X, and because of this big old forest, we're going to try and move through the forest trench line over to try and push out. So if we bring up our little observation balloon, you see the trenches are getting a little bit bigger. Like, yeah, this trench network has become hell on earth. We can start seeing enemy defensive lines, and we can start sort of preparing how we're going to do our advance. As a rule, there's not a lot of subtlety when it comes to the nature of one's advance. It's merely a case of
Attention!
road troops
We need
at
to
the
hold
problem.
this position. We have new orders. The brass wants this piece of ground. We have new orders.
They got annoying planes. I was shooting my stuff.
Ready for fire orders for suppressing barrage. We have our targets. Load them up. Suppression barrage ordered. Set positions. Fire on that position. We can't fire right now.
Ready yourselves.
Are you ready, boys? Suppress that location.
Attention! We hold here. Take firing positions. We have new orders. On the fire step. We have new position. Firing wheel. Stand by for orders. Ready yourselves. Ready on the line.
Suppression fire ordered.
Start artillery in the rear lines. Very historic lecture. Don't just stay there, keep advancing.
We have new orders. We have new orders. On the fire step. Get in position. Stand by for orders. Ready on the line. Ready yourselves. Attention.
Teams ready for suppressing their positions.
We surrender. Reinforcements reporting. We have new orders. We have new orders. Stand by for orders.
Be ready,
Bomb.
barrage orders. Ready for fire orders. Suppress at that location.
Ready yourselves. Get in position. Attention. We're withdrawing. We have new orders. Everyone pull back. Put your weapons down. Reinforcements ready. We have new orders. Stand by for orders. Ready yourselves.
Get in the trenches, do something. I gotta be careful here because I don't keep attention on these guys will get blown up by enemy
Spread
artillery.
out. We're moving. We hold this ground.
Load them up. Suppression fire orders.
We have new orders. We're pulling back. We have new orders. Draw. Stand by for orders. We're withdrawing.
Bring these guys back.
Looks like we're late to the party. Ready yourselves. Ready on the fire step. Attention. Get in position.
You've also got trench raiders like the Gurkhas, which are very good at throwing grenades, but they're very difficult to micro. So how it works is your trench raiders throw grenades into the trenches and they attack. But because they're such a small squad, they can be an absolute nightmare to actually get control of.
Ready to go. Stand by for orders. On the double now. Ready yourselves.
Don't know where the enemy trenches are, but they are doing a disgusting amount of damage to me.
Reinforcements reporting. Attention. We have new orders. Skirmish formation. This position is ours. We need to hold this position. Ready on the line.
Set positions. Load light suppression shells. Ready. Fire on that position. Ready, boys. For suppressing barrage. Fire orders.
We have new orders. Take firing. Stand by for orders. Move out. Ready on the fire step. Ready yourselves. Get in position. Attention. Ready on the line. We have new orders. We have new orders.
We should be okay here. He says, he says, there is something impressive about the hordes of troops just pushing forward and just annihilating the enemy, but there's also something also very frustrating about not being able to micro all these troops. I mean, you could pause and do hard micro, but I feel like the game ends up being too easy that way. Enemy machine gun, lowering me down. Can't get any closer than that. I don't know if I can pull this off. I don't know if it's worth it, if you know what I mean. Why can't I get in this trench?
We have new orders. We can't win this. Incoming fire. This position is ours.
I just don't think it's worth it.
We need to hold this
We could keep pushing here, but I just don't think it's worth it with the amount of reinforcements coming in.
Load them up. Load light suppression shells.
And call for a ceasefire. Yeah, I'm call for a ceasefire. It's not worth it. It's going to cost me too much money and too much supplies. Yeah, 900, 800. I get a major victory, but still. Like 5,000 to their 2,000, 3,000 maybe. Could go in for another round.
We have new orders.
We hebben nieuwe orders.
Give it a go. We'll give it a go. I mean, we've got the supplies to do it, and we've still got the money to do it. And plus, I do want to keep bleeding the Germans so they don't, or the central powers, so to speak, so they don't do their own offensives on the south. Just want to keep them occupied. But this time, we've got our trenches ready. Once again, barrage balloon. I'm going to put artillery literally on the front. Again, historically unrealistic because of counter battery fire, which sadly is not particularly effective in this game either. So you put a small squad on the left.
Ready. We have arrived and await orders.
And on the right.
Like we're late to the
And then
party.
everything else gets dumped in the centre.
We zijn aangekomen en wachten op orders.
you can start seeing the terrain slowly become more and more pockmarked. It will get very bad by 1916. Let's put some comms trenches now as well.
Rapport.
Wat zijn uw orders?
Good. We could go real heavy on the artillery as well. We'll go real heavy on the artillery as well. Let's go full metal jacket. Yeah, I almost made like a whole concentrated trench line. Yeah.
On a de nouveaux ordres. On a de nouveaux
Master troops.
ordres.
Maybe leave one squad here just in case.
Mettez-vous en position.
We hebben nieuwe orders. Wacht op orders.
So let's try and do this a bit more intelligently. So 1,
Tenez-vous prêts.
2,
Opgelet.
3.
We hebben nieuwe orders.
Instead of just going YOLO,
Attention.
let's actually try and tell these squads.
We hebben nieuwe
I
orders.
personally think from experience this
On a
is
de
not
nouveaux ordres.
optimum because your troops are just going to get mown
On a
down
de
trying to break
nouveaux
through.
ordres.
But
Sur la
yeah.
ligne. Attendez les ordres. En position de tir. Tenez-vous prêts. Préparez-vous sur la banquette de tir. We have new orders. Stand by for orders. Laat maar. Laat lichte spervuur verraten. Neem jullie posities in. Zwaar spervuur. Positie. Klaar. Houd jullie klaar, jongens. Start aan spervuur. Attention. Continuez d'avancer. Mettez-vous en position.
You just see the scale slowly change and get progressively more and more excessive.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Mettez-vous sur la ligne. Klaar om te vuren. Geschiet locatie. Laat maar. Velvol. Wit en spel. Neem jullie posities in. Vuur. Teams klaar. Laat lichte spervuur. Klaar, jongens. Start en spervuur.
Most of my troops die. Yeah, see, most of my troops die trying to get across these trench lines.
Deze sorry.
Bereid je voor. Neem jullie posities in.
Tenez-vous prêts. En position de tir. Attention. Levez le drapeau blanc. Reporting for duty. Klaar om te vuren voor zwaar spervuur. Maar. Alle geschut zijn in jullie posities. Spervuur op die locatie. Klaar.
I think I'm going to be just about able to take this one, and then I'm not going to push anymore because the cost of doing it will just be too much.
On a de nouveaux ordres sur la banquette de tir. On a de nouveaux ordres.
No,
En position de tir.
my guys are going to take too much damage from the enemy bombardment.
On est arrivé. Baissez les armes.
Got itched in. Oh! Where's my just guy then? Yeah, column bad when heavy artillery hits. Column fast, but column bad.
Attention, on se replie.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Feu à volonté.
Let's get some of these troops to blow up that igloo.
On est arrivé. On attend les ordres. Attendez les ordres. Dispersez-vous. En marche. Prends les armes, soldats. Mettez-vous en position.
I just don't think it's worth a further advance. Not until we get some like siege batteries. Or some better troops.
Attendez les ordres. Attention, en position de tir. Soyez alerte. On a de nouveaux ordres.
We hebben nieuwe confrontatieformatie.
Although that is looking pretty tempting. That's looking pretty reachable there. The Z. The Z line of doom. Let's retreat these guys back. I don't need them anymore. It's pretty unreliable now, there's 2 damaged.
Attention, retraite totale. Tenez-vous prêts. On se replie.
On dirait qu'on arrive après la bataille.
Au rapport.
I have a sneaking feeling I'm about to lose most of my troops for running across here. No? Good.
Attendez les ordres. Mettez-vous en position.
C'est perdu.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Recouvert.
Machine guns obliterate them. No, go over here.
Au rapport.
We zijn aangekomen en wachten op orders. Hij is de witte vlag.
I'm gonna ceasefire it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. My troops are sitting there getting obliterated. Yeah, I thought it wasn't worth it. If you compare losses, yeah, it wasn't worth it. Shame.
Stand by for
I don't have enough troops there to really push forward anymore. Take one more of these guys. Try and aim for Lille again. Next research I think we'll go for siege artillery. But to get that I need reduced materials. I could upgrade my trenches, but it's just a waste of a research slot. What I want is just to get overwhelming firepower now from siege artillery batteries until I can research tanks. Okay, 700 points, that's not bad. I can live with that. Nope. B. Oh yeah, I played this one before. B is a pain. First line. Second line. Third line. And we need a second line here as well. 1, 2, 3. There we are. Two really quite close for the artillery, so that might be a problem, but we should be fine. I don't think we're going to get... I don't think it's going to be as bad as the game has said it's going to be. Yep. Put down our light artillery. Don't have to be too close because we're just defending the front line. And then we'll dump our troops down. We'll need a command trench here.
Renfort, prêt.
On arrive après le bataille.
On dirait qu'on arrive après la bataille.
Au rapport.
On arrive après la bataille, on
Renfort,
dirait.
au rapport.
On est arrivé, on attend les ordres.
Renfort prêt.
Au rapport.
Nice little second line.
On arrive après la bataille, on
Renfort, au
dirait.
rapport.
Au rapport.
Renfort au rapport.
Renfort, au rapport.
Renfort prêt.
And then we can have some fun with what I like to call the Devil's Paintbrush. You don't put these guys on the front, you put them just slightly behind. That's alright, I should have enough supplies for artillery. That's from the supply drawer. Yeah, 250. Yeah. Of course, I love it. I love how the game progresses. Still not the complete nightmare of 1916-17 yet, but we're getting there. To be fair, no, I've already used up all my supplies. I was going to say maybe we should go on the offensive here, but because these trench lines don't look too bad. And plus, I don't need to. I can just win by catastrophic casualties. So the MG guns are your real force multipliers, but they're extremely vulnerable once the enemy gets within range. So you want to keep them on the reserve line behind and have those outs of fire. I can put one over here. It's a bit cheeky, but we'll see if that works. Is that a random burning bush? No, it's not. I was going to say. Of course, if you really wanted to, you can make some disgustingly elaborate trench networks. Like you turn this entire area into trenches. But I've very rarely felt like I've needed to in most campaigns. I've just been able to form very strong defensive lines just by doing a two-line system. Yeah, the machine guns will just be mowing you down. Of course, if you are taking too many casualties from artillery fire, you just simply upgrade your trenches. But it's quite expensive, so I very rarely do it. Yeah.
Équipe, prêt, chargez les outils légers, d'artillerie. Préparez-vous, soldats. Chargez pour le tir de cible. Préparez-vous à recevoir les ordres de tir.
Sadly, no barbed wire yet, but I try not to be too defensive because it's too easy to win defensive. So I try and invest as much as I can in offensive technology. So that's why you're not seeing any barbed wire research or trench. I did do it one playthrough. It was pretty fun just sitting here and watching troops get mown down, but but there's no challenge in it. And that's really why I really think I need to change the system to make it more offensively minded, to actually compel people to go on the offensive. Sadly, artillery can suppress. You can see the artillery suppressing most of my rear line troops, making it very difficult for me to overly grind the troops down.
Tenez-vous prêts. Préparez-vous sur la ligne.
And of course, you can upgrade the machine guns so they take less damage, and you can have like concrete pillboxes and things like that. But I very rarely felt the need to either. You can't research everything in the research tree, so I often don't attempt to try and be all round. I try and go for like siege artillery first,
Renfort, prêt.
because siege artillery, it will break the enemy positions eventually just by sheer mass. It just takes a while, really. Your late 1950, 1916 is mostly just build up. And that's what I do like. You do get to a certain stage in the early game where you simply cannot advance anymore, or you can't, just by the sheer casualties you get inflicted upon you. So you see the AI has changed up its offensive technique now. It's trying to move elsewhere,
Tir de barrage.
trying to assess another weak point.
Pilonnez cette position. Équipe, prêt. Chargez les obus légers. Commencez le barrage. Préparez-vous, soldats. Chargez pour le tir de barrage. Tirez avec toute l'artillerie.
Alas, I don't think it's going to succeed in that. Come on, stop being suppressed. Fire! They do need to have persistence bodies though. Like you should, and in the Great War, appreciate the mindlessness of it. So what I've found, historically speaking, is that often the punch-through tactics, if you did punch-through offensives in the Great War, you were more successful. So you picked a narrow front, threw artillery in that position and try and break through, you generally had a greater chance of success on wider offensives. So this game sort of reflects that. You saw early on I was trying to do this mass punch-throughs on particular points. Mass offensive didn't really achieve much, and actually led to significant casualties, whereas a mass punch-through on a narrow front generally could get me more results. Of course, I've yet to see German tanks, so I'll have to bear in mind whether or not tanks OP, but I do know that the Allied tanks are very OP, especially the British Mark Vs. You spam them and the game completely changes into a blobathon. Eventually you just don't even need artillery. Tanks are a little bit OP. Counter battery. That's fine, that's fine.
Chargez l'artillerie. Barrage ordonné. Pilonnez cette position.
Okay, let's see how well that works out for you. Spoilers, probably not very well.
Commencez le barrage. Équipe, prêt. Rechargez pour le tir de barrage. Tirez avec toute l'artillerie.
The AI is pretty good at suppressing your machine guns once they find them as well. That's what I quite like. Otherwise, machine guns would be too disgusting. They'd be like, you can see the suppression there. They are doing a good job at suppressing your troops, so your troops, the enemy troops can break through. It's not enemy damage. Retreat. Move this guy up.
On est arrivé. On attend les ordres.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Tout le monde, attendez les ordres. Préparez-vous sur la ligne.
And of course the reason why I retreat my troops is because then I don't have to pay to replace them. So you only have to pay for destroyed battalions.
On attend les ordres.
So if you read this little tooltip, does not count as a defeat with respect to score or objectives. So if you want to maintain a high score, which means it costs less cost, then that's what you want to do. I think they'll call a ceasefire soon. Like you can tell by the casualties. That's what I will say. Potentially the AI needs to be a little bit better about amassing enough resources for massed offensives on a catastrophically large scale, as opposed to their current numbers. Like perhaps they should mash like twice as much artillery and twice as much infantry. Instead they they have a size that's enough to raise an eyebrow, but not enough to actually make you concerned about losing your positions. Never attack. Oh, this time they're attacking on the right. This is clever though, the fact they are trying to test front. They're not just trying to push in one sector. Like, they are pretty good at finding your weak point in your front line. So once they do achieve some notable success, they will try and push elsewhere. Ugh, to be a machine gunner. Yo, you almost got to the trench. Shame. Models aren't too bad either. I do like the pile of shells, that's quite clever. Quite fancy. But you'd think like a counter battery would be dangerous, but actually counter battery is perhaps the least effective thing you can do. Which is a tad depressing. I'll have a ceasefire with you. I'm quite happy with the results. I don't think I took too many casualties. Yeah. 14,000 to my 500. That's the sort of casualties you like to see. And of course, this massively tilts the mid-game into your favour. You're going to get to the stage now where I could quite literally auto-resolve the rest of the game and win by late 1916, but there's no fun in it, so there's no point. So the attempt was there, but it is quite a loose attempt, you know what I mean? Like, it does fall flat on its face. The strategy elements and the mechanics it's tried to introduce aren't executed properly. They don't really, what do you call it? It's almost half there, half cocked. It just doesn't. It's not seamless. There are gaping flaws in the game, and of course it's not early access, and it's a full release, so it's unlikely that you will see updates that fix it. I mean, there are no obligation to do so, but that's the thing what sort of saddens me about this. It has a lot of potential, and the setting makes it very unique, and the playstyle makes it very unique. I feel like the playstyle is not so much to entertain you, but to inform you. Like, if you were playing this for the first time as a player, and you're playing for the sole purpose of an RTS, you would perhaps be a little bit peeved by the nature of the First World War playstyle. But if you're playing it from an historical point of view, you're going to be pretty impressed, well, also pretty peeved, because some of the more historical elements are not there, such as the Great and Glorious. Oh, it's going to be a problem. Tank failure rates and so on and so forth. So we know the drill. Light artillery. Couple of infantry positions. Perfect strafing run, but luckily we don't have to worry about that too much.
Au rapport.
Renfort, prêt.
Au rapport.
On est arrivé. On attend les ordres.
Renfort au rapport.
On arrive après la bataille, on dirait.
Renfort au rapport.
Renfort prêt. Renfort prêt.
I keep thinking they're saying parkour.
On est arrivé.
Parkour,
On attend les ordres.
but that is wrong. They're not saying parkour. 1, 2, and this just means my troops don't have to move through no man's land to reinforce. There we are. And then with that, we can now build our machine guns of doom. I refuse to believe they can have artillery suppress every single machine gun position, so I'm a quite happy camper there. The meta is supplying this. It's the supply that effectively lets you win, because you can just throw more and more troops out and use larger and larger artillery barrages. This map hasn't seen a lot of fighting, so I don't think we're going to see too much destruction here. The odd shell, but nothing too excessive. Loonville's going to, well, it'll be Loonville and it'll be Lille. Those will be the two big ones that are just filled with shite. Still basic trenches though. We don't equip good trenches. The Germans have good trenches. I think historically as well, the Germans were like immediately went to building concrete trenches and so forth for the long haul, whereas the Brits, and I suppose it was also the nature of terrain up in like Ypres and the floodplains. It was a nightmare to actually entrench properly, but it took a while for the Allies to get some decent trenches in. Right. Their first wave, let's see how well that works out for them. Okay, I'm going to try and suppress the artillery. Oh wow, they almost made it. They're hitting hard on the right.
Préparez-vous à recevoir les ordres de tir.
On a de nouveaux ordres.
Chargez l'artillerie de barrage. Ignorez cette position. Établissez les chargés les obus. Commencez le barrage.
Attendez les ordres. En avance sur la ligne.
C'est bon.
Tenez-vous prêts. Sur la ligne.
On est arrivé.
Attention.
Hitting very hard on the right.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Préparez-vous à tirer.
Prêt. En position de tir.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Mettez-vous en position.
Attention.
Attendez les ordres, préparez-vous sur la ligne. On arrive après la bataille, on dirait.
I wonder where the artillery's firing from. No idea.
Attention. Préparez-vous à tirer.
Tenez-vous prêts. Sur la ligne.
I should have built a comms line here so they could stay in their trenches, but oh well. Oh well.
Au rapport.
Maybe I should have put an MBG here as well. Oh well. Not mad, not mad, not mad.
On a de nouveaux
I'll leave
ordres.
this guy here. Why is he morale so bad? It's tired, I suppose. Ah, okay, there we go. That's why I want you. That's where I want you to attack. Test this part of the front. My MGs. They haven't suppressed the machine guns, so it's over. It's over for them.
Équipe, prête. On a de nouveaux ordres. Préparez-vous, rechargez pour tirer avec barrage. Préparez-vous à recevoir les ordres de barrage possible. Chargez l'artillerie de barrage sur cette position.
I was saying that they are getting pretty close. Ah, it's the good troops as well. That's why they're actually getting in.
Attention.
Storm machine guns, do your bit.
On a de nouveaux ordres.
On a de nouveaux ordres. En position de tir. On a de nouveaux ordres. On a de nouveaux ordres.
No, they got in the trenches.
On se replie, repliez-vous.
Encore, prêt.
On dirait qu'on arrive après la bataille.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Préparez-vous à tirer.
On a de nouveaux ordres. En position de tir. On est arrivé. On attend les ordres.
That went better for them than I expected.
Établissez les positions de barrage. Ordonnez cette position. Équipe, prête. Chargez les obus.
Because they're using so much artillery.
Chargez pour le tirer avec toute l'artillerie. Attendez les ordres.
Don't like that.
Tenez-vous prêts. Préparez-vous à tirer.
Attendez les ordres. Mettez-vous en position.
Attendez les ordres.
Attention. Mettez-vous en position. On a de nouveaux ordres.
On se replie. Prêt.
Okay, they're sending in the conscript now, nothing too bad. Yeah, artillery's pretty bad, but it's not to the point where I have to worry about reinforcing my system, my trenches yet.
Attention. Retraite. On a de nouveaux ordres. Mettez-vous en position. On arrive après une bataille, on dirait.
On a de nouveaux ordres. On bat en retraite.
On a de nouveaux ordres. Préparez-vous sur la ligne.
Préparez-vous à recevoir les ordres de tir. Tir de barrage sur cette position. Chargez l'artillerie.
That's
de
not the
barrage.
cold, isn't it?
Ordonnez cette position.
Tenez-vous prêts. Préparez-vous sur la ligne.
Attendez les ordres. En position de tir.
Équipe,
Front of a barrage.
chargez les obus légers. Préparez-vous, soldats. Rechargez pour le tir de barrage. Tirez avec toute la. Préparez-vous à recevoir les ordres de tir.
Let them go.
Attention.
This is more costly than I had wanted. I think my trench is also too close as well, which is a problem. If I build a second layer, then we should be okay.
On a de nouveaux ordres. On tient, préparez-vous sur la ligne.
Renfort en rapport.
And I think they've found their weak spot. Oh no, they're happy to accept a ceasefire. I'll take a ceasefire. Again, too easy. They lost 3, 7, 12,000 by 2,000. And that's money they can't replace. Perhaps they need to double the troop numbers. Maybe they need to double everything. Double supply, double troop numbers. I know it may tax some machines, but I think they perhaps need to just increase everything. To the soldier subjected to nervous strain and hard work, cocaine once used must become a terrible temptation. It will, for an hour, charm away his troubles, fatigue and anxiety. It will give him fictitious strength and vigour, but it will also in the end render him worthless as a soldier and a man. At times, February 1916, a handful of Canadian troops have been caught with cocaine. So if we punish, we get 1,000 gold, but if we pursue, we can track down the drugs. Well, I want the money, so that's a shame. I could go for this with rifle damage, improved sights, but that's going to be another year of defensive action, which I don't really want to do. It's just stalemate. There's a start of resolving now.
Attention.
Because we've got a numbers advantage. I can probably just wear these guys down now. Oh yeah, Gallipoli, don't worry about it. That's all the resolve. And reinforcements, where to put you? So where are you massing troops on? Where did you attack last time? Right, let's send these guys over here. Chatillon de Mont. We've got more troops, so what kind of troops can we get? So Belgium, we'll send these guys over here.
Stand by for orders.
All I want is siege artillery. Italy's joined the war, don't worry about it. Again, don't worry about any of this. And this is where this little game gets a bit like, eh. Next step, advanced artillery. We could all resolve this. Again, I can just resolve my way through the rest of the war now. I suppose I could fight this battle. Until I get my sheer mass. To take Lille. I'll play for another hour. We will do a full campaign of this, but this will just be sort of this one-off review. What map is this? Okay, the map is slowly churning up into garbage. Yeah, we're not playing that game. I'm not falling for it this time. Put the elite boys
On est
in.
arrivé. On attend les ordres. On arrive après la bataille, on dirait. Au rapport. Renfort, au rapport. Renfort prêt. On est
Parcours.
arrivé. On attend les ordres.
Parcours, parcours.
On arrive après la bataille, on dirait. Au rapport.
Renfort,
On
prêt.
arrive après la bataille, on dirait.
Renfort, au rapport.
On est arrivé. On attend les
Au
ordres.
rapport. Renfort, au rapport.
Renfort prêt.
Okay, and then we'll just build our comms trenches. Crap. It's gonna be reduced. I just noticed that I don't want to be too far north because of those forests. That'll have to do.
On est arrivé. On attend les ordres. On arrive après la bataille, on dirait. Au rapport. Renfort, au rapport.
Parkour, parkour. Yeah, I can't be too close because those forests, as you noticed last time, were an absolute death trap. It's too easy for them to get too close, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I gotta go this way. Yep. 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 I wonder if I can set up another commerce trench. Not over here, sadly not. Maybe another trench here? Yeah, there's not going to be a good one. Yeah, it's going to be a poo trench. I'll have to do. That'll have to do, donkey. See, I quite agree with that statement. Like, long wars, even if you're like being humane, just means more people die in the long term. Whereas a short war, if it's brutal, at least it's short. I'd rather a brutally short war rather than a long war that's still brutal but it's in degrees. Hopefully this will be enough, but I've got good elite troops there, we should be fine. And this mess this bulge, this MG hell, will also hopefully be quite useful to us. What sort of trenches are we talking about here? The poo kind. Like, this is still pretty good for me. You haven't solidified too much. But there's no point me attacking until I've got siege artillery. Like you notice in the final, like when I tried to do my last offensive, that all that really did for me was get me killed.
Établissez les positions. Tir de barrage sur cette position. Équipe, tir de barrage ordonné. Pilonnez cette position. Préparez-vous, chargez les obus légers. Le barrage.
Really going at it. Knocked out one artillery position.
Préparez-vous à recevoir les ordres pour le tir de barrage. L'artillerie, chargez l'artillerie. Tir de barrage donné à nos cibles. Établissez les positions.
Attention!
Équipe, tir de barrage sur cette position. Feu.
I think we'll be fine here.
On a de nouveaux ordres.
Chargez.
Little fake offensive, eh boys? Little fake offensive, clever that. Pity that you use all your artillery in the wrong spot though.
Préparez-vous, soldats. De barrage ordonné. Pilonnez cette position. Préparez-vous à recevoir les ordres de barrage. Rechargez pour le tir de barrage. L'artillerie.
Now that was a massacre.
On a de nouveaux ordres.
Draw this boy. Send this guy up.
En position de tir.
Send this guy up.
Attendez les ordres sur la ligne.
Oh yeah, they can destroy emplacements. It's not that bad. Not something I'm going to cry about.
Tenez-vous prêts. En position de tir.
I suppose I shouldn't have my trenches too far into no man's land because actually this means the artillery can strike me better. But hey ho. What's done is done.
Tenez-vous prêts. Préparez-vous sur la ligne.
Chargez l'artillerie. Le tir de barrage à nos cibles.
I don't think they've set their artillery up enough to actually hold this position. Quite embarrassing really. I do realise I don't care about that. I'm too busy watching and enjoying this.
Établissez les tirs de barrage sur cette position. Équipe, tir de barrage.
Getting close now, aren't you boys?
Préparez-vous, soldats. Chargez les obus légers. Tir de barrage.
Attention.
That's a comms trench. Easy. I'm gonna start fly speeding this. And start turning this into a real nightmare for them. If we fight another battle on this, I'll just keep on entrenching the north. I don't really want to trench any closer to this though, so I'll try and... It's a pity I can't entrench in forest, but hey. I wonder if I can blow forest up.
Préparez-vous à recevoir les ordres de pour le tir de barrage. Tirez avec toute l'artillerie. Chargez l'artillerie. Ordre de tir de barrage sonné. Établissez les tirs de barrage sur cette position. Équipe, tir de barrage ordonné. Pilonnez cette position. Préparez-vous, chargez les obus légers. Commencez le barrage. Préparez-vous à recevoir les ordres de tir de barrage. L'artillerie.
I don't really need to watch this, do I?
Attendez les ordres. Retraite.
Attention,
Tenez-vous prêts.
on a de nouveaux ordres. Préparez-vous à tirer. On a de nouveaux ordres. Retraite totale.
On est arrivé. On attend les ordres. On a de nouveaux ordres. Sur la ligne.
Yeah, I was sick. Bear in mind, you just lost half your your fighting manpower. Wow! Wow! Thanks, I guess. Can I finally get my... No, I can't. Oh, what did I upgrade in the end? Fine. Give me siege artillery. What does it actually give me? Ah, it's a bit garbage. Yeah.
Attendez les ordres.
What else can I upgrade? There's
Tenez-vous
two.
prêts.
Cool. Verdun OP. Got it. Everyone's got supplies. Yep, everyone's got supplies. So we do nothing. And we continue to do nothing. Stalemate. Minor loss, I don't care. I can win this now as my numbers. Low ammunition. Why don't I have any supply? Oh, I know why. There we go. I need advanced artillery. And then once I have advanced artillery, I'll research source materials. Yeah, the French are revolting. They're not going to move anywhere. Stalemate, don't care. Minor loss. What have they got? Heavy artillery, a pilot. Again, I don't think it's going to be a minor loss. I'm just going to auto-resolve it. Because I know I can win it. Finally. Give me the supply I need so I can have some fun. Advanced artillery, there we go. And then our next thing we'll research will be this bad boy. And then we can have some real fun. So this is where the game gets interesting. So siege artillery you can use at the cost of supply to do some pretty honking damage. But you just need a lot of it. So we buy like 5 of these bad boys.
Ready yourselves.
So now we have 6 artillery shells. Stalemate, okay. Stalemate, don't care. and buy this bad boy. Trade some for some supply, and you guessed it, buy more. 1, 2. We've got to be careful of our money now a little bit. So if I attacked from here, that's going to give me a major loss. But if I attack from here, that's going to give me a major loss. But these guys have got elite troops, I believe, so we'll attack from there instead. So. Thanks, going to give me elite troops, are you? Oh no, it's garbage troops. Where did you attack me last time? No idea. Let's put one guy there.
On a de nouveaux ordres. On y va.
Yeah. Spies. No one cares. Stalemate, no one cares. I'll mine a loss. I'm winning, so I don't care. Money. Over morale. There we go. And then our final thing will be that. And then we should be good to go. Now I will show you what a fully operational battery looks like, and start seeing some disgusting damage we'll be able to inflict upon the enemy. So we're back at Lille. Wonderful Lille. Of course, we're still probably not going to achieve a colossal success, but we are going to do some disgusting damage instead, using our copious amount of supply and artillery to quite literally kill everything. And now the idea is to bleed the enemy into what can only be called paste. So with our already existing territory, we can now do 12 days of bombardment with a 58% chance of destroying enemy batteries. At the same time, we'll put down some light artillery on the front. 1, 2, 3. Some heavy artillery. 1, 2. And then we'll start putting down our best troops on the right.
Reporting for duty. Reinforcements reporting. Reinforcements ready. We have arrived and await orders. Looks like we're late to the party. Reporting for duty.
Sure, I could put down some
reinforcements ready. Reinforcements ready.
Reinforcements ready.
a barrage balloon, but why? And so what siege artillery does is it does this and destroys pretty much everything. And wears it down to a nub. It's not as effective as it looks, but still looks cool to do, so hey ho. Then we take our elite troops and we send them across the enemy, across no man's land to try and take new positions.
We hold here, ready on the fire step. We have new orders. We hold this ground. Stand by for orders. Get in position.
Set position.
Ready yourselves.
Teams ready. Go for suppressing barrage. Start the barrage. Be ready, boys. Suppression barrage ordered. All done. Ready for fire. Suppress at that location. Targets. Load them up. Ready for barrage. Set position. Barrage on that position.
Attention. Fire. We have new orders. On the line. We have new orders. Stand by for orders. Ready yourselves.
And it is effectively destroyed enemy trenches.
We have new orders.
Teams ready. Suppression fire ordered.
You can see here the enemy is attempting to counter
Ready yourselves. On the line.
or send in reinforcements, but they've got no trenches, so they can't.
We have new orders. Ready on the fire step. We have new
You might want
orders.
to move quick for you.
Position. Stand by for orders. Ready on the line. Ready yourselves. On the line. Reinforcements ready.
Ready for fire orders.
Attention. Take firing position.
Yeah, we can bomb Mr. Hill.
Position.
Yes, you guys.
It's for barrage. Load light suppression shells. Ready.
We have new orders. Fire step. We have arrived and await orders. We have new orders. Get in position.
Let's
Stand
move
by
you guys
for
forward.
orders. Ready yourselves.
Be ready, boys. Load for suppressing barrage. Ready for fire orders. Fire on that position.
Attention. We have new orders. Ready on the line. On the line. We have new orders. Put your weapons down.
And you can see how the battle changes once you have copious artillery support.
Stand by for orders.
Load them up. Suppression barrage ordered.
Ready yourselves. Ready on the fire step. We can't win this. Attention. Form ranks. We need to hold this position. Get in position.
Position. Suppress at that location. Ready. Set for barrage. Targets.
Reporting for duty. We have new orders. We have new orders. Stand by for orders. Ready yourselves. Take firing positions. Attention. Ready on the fire step. We have new orders. Get in position.
Be ready, boys. Full barrage. Fire.
Keep going, boys.
New orders. Stand by for orders. Take firing positions.
Suppression fire on that position. Load them up. Load light suppression shell. Barrage.
Let's use our heavy artillery on this position.
Target set.
Ready yourselves. Get in position. Attention. Scatter for combat. Ready on the line. We have new orders. Spread out. On the line.
Keep going.
We have new orders. Fire men.
Don't know how much damage this actually does to enemy positions, but what I do know is that
For orders.
siege artillery looks cool.
Once this piece of ground, we need to go. We will. Ready yourselves.
Let's retreat this.
Withdraw.
Let's retreat
We
this.
have new orders.
Retreat this.
Withdraw. Reinforcements reporting. We have new orders. Charge!
Set position.
Prep for
Fire all
barrage.
guns. Load for suppressing
Teams
barrage.
ready.
We have our targets. Suppression barrage ordered.
Stand by for orders. On the double now. Fire! Reinforcements ready. Ready yourselves. Move out. We surrender. Attention. We're withdrawing.
We're throwing troops out, but it shouldn't be too bad.
We have arrived and await orders. We have new orders.
Suppress at that location.
Because we can suppress them.
Suppression fire ordered.
We have new orders. Stand by for orders. Looks like we're late to the party. Ready yourselves. Hold here. Reporting for duty.
Load them up. Load light suppression
Fire all
shells.
guns. Attention. Pick your targets. We have new orders. We have new orders.
That's the last of our elites moving forward.
We hold this ground. Ready yourselves.
But you can see how the trenches have just changed over time, which I really like. That is really quite an interesting part of the game.
Position is ours. Attention. We need to hold this position. We have new orders.
Set position for suppressing
targets. We have new orders. Stand by for orders. Ready yourselves.
It's a very
Form
unique.
ranks. The brass wants this piece of ground. Attention.
Fire on that
Put your
position!
weapons down.
Hold your fire! Ready for fire orders! Barrage ordered!
We have new orders. Positions.
Load them up! Suppress at that location! Fire all guns!
Reinforcements reporting. We have new orders. Stand by for orders. Get in position. Ready yourselves. Attention. Hold here. We have new orders. We hold this ground. We have new orders. We can't win this.
Just keep going.
Fire ordered! Targets! Load light suppression shells!
Reinforcements ready. Stand by for orders. Combat position is ours. Ready yourselves. Attention.
Be ready, boys, for suppressing barrage! Targeting fire shells!
We have new orders.
Keep going, boys. The supply is bad now, but
We have arrived and await orders.
they're doing a pretty good job.
We have new orders. Pick your targets. Stand by for orders. Ready yourselves.
Ready for fire orders! Check coordinates for barrage! Push them up! Start the barrage! Suppression barrage ordered! Fire all guns!
Attention. Get in position. We have new orders. We have new orders. Stand by for orders. Ready on the fire step. We need to hold this position. Ready yourselves.
Yeah, it took a lot of supply to break it, but that's sort of what you're supposed to be doing, just like slowly building up this sort of ridiculous mass.
We have new orders. We're pulling back. Stand by for orders. We're moving. Get in position. Ready yourselves. We have new orders. Looks like we're late to the party. Attention. We have new orders. Get moving. We have new orders. Withdraw. Stand by for orders. We're withdrawing. Ready yourselves. Stand by for orders. Attention. Surrender. Ready on the line. Raise the white flag. Reporting for duty.
Nuts. And then we should be ready for our final assault. Soon, comrade.
The brass wants this. We have new orders. Everyone, we have new orders. Full withdraw. Reinforcements reporting.
We have arrived and await orders.
And then we'll bring all our troops together for one final push.
Stand by for orders. Spread out. We hold here. We need to go. On the double now.
Sadly, because the trenches are destroyed, I can't. See, it's a bit of a dual-edged sword, because by destroying the trenches, you can't use them yourself, but any reinforcements that come in are pretty much paralyzed. So it sort of swings and roundabouts, really.
Be ready, boys! Set for barrage! Targets! Ready for fire orders! Suppress at that location!
Put your weapons
Load
down.
them up! Suppression fire ordered! Set position! Load light suppression shells!
Attention. Get in position. We have new orders. Ready on the line. We have new orders. On the line. Stand by for orders. Ready yourselves. Ready on the fire step. Attention. Get in position. We have new orders.
Go.
Moving. We've arrived and await orders. We have new orders.
And you guys run into extend the last of our troops north as
Stand
well.
by for orders. Get moving. We need to go. Ready on the line. Ready yourselves. On the double line. Attention. Take firing positions.
And we're good. We're done. Easy victory, boys. And that's that slow overcoming. So it's the story, and I really like how slowly but surely you begin to overcome the supremacy of defense. And of course, by the time you get tanks, this just becomes a rollover. But I just love how progressively as the game goes on, artillery becomes more and more cancerous. And the terrain becomes more and more busted. And that is our first clean sweep. I don't know if we'll be able to get a second one. Fingers crossed we can. Because that means we'll be able to take Lille. Lille. So although it cost me a lot of money and quite a bit of supply, it's still very good. It's cost me 6,000 there, 3, 6, 7, 8,000. Good, we keep doing the damage and they won't be able to attack. So now they've lost 1 star, so we have to fight again over this territory, which I think is a bit silly. I think it's a bit pointless, but hey ho. Give me a loss. Give me a great victory apparently. I'd rather you. Give me a stalemate on this and just wear it down, and then we'll attack here a second time.
Wacht op orders.
Take a great victory here. But I have an artillery piece. So we can finally take Lille. You can't win this. Supplies are pretty bad at the moment. We can upgrade our supply shack. Send more supplies to our beleaguered troops. Let's see what we can do. Apparently that would be a stalemate. I disagree. Major loss. Minor loss. But we can take this next turn. So let's take this now. Let's take Lille. Lille. And this is the real annoying part of the game. You've got to fight over the same objective twice, even though you achieve a massive breakthrough, which I don't think is necessary. I don't think it's necessary. So once again, attempting to break through. The same objective we already broke through. This time though, it's winter.
We have arrived and await orders. Looks like we're late to the party. Reporting for duty.
We have arrived.
Looks like we're late to the party.
Looks like we're late to the party.
Reporting for duty.
Reporting for duty.
Some artillery pieces, so once again, light builder batteries. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then some heavy batteries. 1, 2, and finally put our last good troop on the right.
Reinforcements reporting.
Whatever's left will just be annihilated.
Ready yourselves. Move out. This position is ours.
I'm sure if I don't know what I can get into anymore because I've blown most of it up.
Attention. We need to get in position.
Ready for suppressing barrage. Be ready, boys. For barrage. Ready for suppression barrage ordered. Load them up. Suppress at that location.
We have new orders. Fire at will. We have new orders. Ready on the line. Stand by for orders. Charge! Ready yourselves. On the line. Attention. Take firing position.
Set position for area barrage. Suppression.
Light on the front,
Be ready, boys.
heavy on the rear.
We have new orders. We have new orders. Stand by for orders. Ready on the line. Ready yourselves.
Ready for fire. Check coordinates for barrage. Fire on that position.
Reinforcements ready. Attention. On the line.
Load them up. No light suppression cell. Positions. Fire all guns.
We have new orders. We have new orders. Ready on the fire step. Stand by for orders.
There we go.
Ready yourselves. Attention.
Set for barrage. Targets.
Arms up, boys.
Retreat back. Get them in.
We have arrived and await orders.
And we can speed it up.
We have new orders. Draw! Looks like we're late to the party. The brass wants to stand by for orders. Ready on the line.
Oh, okay, that's why we're getting hammered so badly.
Ready, boys. Ready for barrage.
They're using improved artillery.
Pressing barrage. Start the barrage.
Reporting for duty.
Load them up.
Right, we'll hold out for now. We'll wait.
Ready yourselves. We're withdrawing. Reinforcements reporting. We're moving.
There's no need to blow our loads too early. Any more troops coming up? Yeah.
We have new orders. We hold here. We hold this ground. We have new orders. Skirmish formation on the line.
So let's use one of our artillery points on this.
Ready for incoming barrage.
Let's use our next artillery point as soon as we can.
Team suppression barrage ordered. Fire all guns. Be ready, boys. Suppress at that location. Targets.
Stand by for orders. Take firing position. Ready yourselves.
God, they're simply running from the trenches now, which is great.
Suppression fire ordered. Load them up. No light suppression shells. Position. Start the barrage. Ready for area barrage.
Attention. We have new orders. Get in position.
Be ready, boys. For suppressing barrage.
We have new orders. On the line. Stand by for orders. Ready yourselves. Ready on the fire step.
Ready for suppression barrage ordered. Load them up.
We can reinforce this all day, I don't care.
Position. Suppress that location.
Attention. Everyone, we have new orders. Get in position. We have new orders. Stand by for orders. Ready on the line. Reinforcements ready. Ready yourselves. Forward throw. Attention. We have new orders. Raise the white flag. We have new orders.
Be ready, boys. Check
Let's
coordinates
keep
for
bombing this then.
guns.
We have arrived and await
Let's
orders.
keep bombing this.
Put your weapons party.
Damn.
Suppression fire order.
Set position.
Fire on that position. Load light suppression charge. Be ready, boys. Load for suppressing barrage.
Ready yourselves. Attention. We have new orders. We have new orders. Prepare
I want to get into this trench here now. But it's easier said than done.
Stand by for orders. Ready yourselves. Attention.
Ready for fire orders. Load them up. Suppression barrage ordered.
Positions. Fire. Team
Suppress at that location.
position. Ready.
Suppression fire ordered. Barrage.
We have new orders. Get moving.
Charge. Charge.
Light suppression shells.
We have new orders. On the double now.
Load them up. Load. Suppressing barrage.
Positions. Fire.
Teams ready. Suppression barrage ordered. Fire on that position.
Stand by for orders. We're moving.
Okay, we're fine. We can just fire through this now.
Suppress at that location.
Speed through it. Just keep suppressing whatever troops they've got.
Load them up. Load light suppression shells.
Ready yourselves.
Are really struggling on this? Oh, that's embarrassing.
Check your targets. We have new orders.
Good.
We have new orders.
Let's begin again. Pushing towards the next trench. How much ammunition have I got left? Not
Ready
too
on the
bad.
fire step.
Set position. Load for suppressing
No more
barrage.
artillery, no more artillery,
Positions.
no more artillery.
Barrage ordered.
Good artillery,
Start the barrage.
good artillery.
Fire all guns.
Stand by for orders. Ready yourselves. Attention. We have new orders. We have new orders. Stand by for orders. Ready on the fire step. We can't win this. Reporting for duty.
Ready for fire. Suppress at that location.
Can't really afford
Fire ordered. Set position. Light suppression
any more
shells.
fancy artillery, which is a shame.
Ready yourselves. Attention. Get in position. We have new orders. We surrender. Reinforcements reporting. We have new orders. Raise the white flag. Stand by for orders. Put your weapons down. Ready yourselves.
Prep ready. Start the barrage. Be ready for suppressing barrage. Ready for fire. Suppression barrage ordered. Targets.
Attention. Ready on the line. We have new orders.
Come on, boys, where's my troops coming from?
We have new orders.
Oh, when are my troops coming? Taking their sweet ass time.
We have arrived and await orders. Stand by for orders.
Load them up. We have new orders. Set position. Suppress at that location.
Ready yourselves. Fire! We can't win this. Take firing position. We have new orders. Gather for combat. The brass wants this piece of ground. Looks like we're late to the party.
Teams ready. Load for area barrage. Ready, boys.
I'll wear this down.
We have new orders. Pick your targets.
Ready for fire. Suppression fire ordered.
Stand by for orders. Hold here. Arms up, boys. Ready yourselves. We hold this ground.
This is a tough nut to crack. This is very irritating.
Load light suppression targets.
We have new orders. We surrender.
Why is it such a tough nut to crack? I suspect because there's troops over here firing down on me. There it is.
New orders. Reinforcements reporting. Stand by for orders. Position is ours. Ready yourselves. Attention. Ready on the fire. We have new orders. Get in position.
Finally. Those machine guns run like that.
Spread out. We need to hold this position. The brass wants this piece of ground.
Ready for check coordinates. Fire all guns.
Stand by for orders. We hold here. Keep moving. We hold this ground.
Good. Now let's retreat this guy. Retreat already broken troops. Troops I can't really use anymore.
We have new orders. Everyone pull back.
And send what's left over here.
Reinforcements ready.
I suspect those guys aren't dead. So, enlarge forces. Just try to roll in position.
Position is ours. We have arrived and await orders.
And then we'll try again.
Ready yourselves. We need to hold this position. Attention. Prepare for incoming fire. We have new orders. Put your weapons down. New orders.
I'm sure these guys are getting shot. There they are. No idea what's shooting them, but it's a pain in the ass.
Looks like we're late to the party.
Keep mowing me down.
Teams ready. Suppress at that location. Be ready. Suppression fire on order. Position.
We have new orders.
Ready yourselves.
Reinforcements reporting.
Attention. We have new orders. Positions.
Oh no, but we're so close.
Arms up, boys. We have new orders. Form ranks. Ready on the fire step. Reinforcements reporting.
Low light suppression charge. Load them up. Low for suppressing barrage.
Stand by for orders. On the line.
Reporting for duty. Raise the white. Stand by for orders. Gather for combat.
It's so close to a clean sweep.
Reinforcements reporting. Put your weapons down.
Set positions. Ready full barrage. Target teams ready. Prep for barrage.
Ready yourselves. Take fire in positions.
Be ready. Suppression barrage on position.
Ready yourselves. Now you want us. We have new orders. Attention.
Attention. Spread out.
Reinforcements ready.
There we go.
We need to hold this position.
Job done.
We have new orders. Spread out. Pick your targets.
That synergy between light and heavy artillery is pretty good, but as you can only really achieve that once you've got supply superiority.
Fire men. Ready on the line.
I'll be glad to get rid of you. Yay, a sweep. And that means we've got little. Does it actually mean we get anything from it? Not really, but you know how it'd be. All it took was cost me 1,100 troops.
Up to mighty London came an Irishman one day.
You can just be very frustrating having to fight the same battle twice. It's very annoying. They need to sort that really. You should change it around. And now we have some territory. So we'll end this turn. Let's do a stalemate here. Apparently it's a loss, but it doesn't matter to me really. At this stage the war's more or less won. And we can finally start researching things that actually matter to me now, such as... I don't really care about that. I don't really care about casualties. Don't need that either. I need more money, so we'll save that. The only reason I wanted... So I've got 3 cannon pieces here. That's my 6 cannon pieces.
We have new orders. On the double now.
And we can chill. I don't need to research any of this. Yay, but I still need money. Having to pay for more supply is a nightmare. So how many? 6 artillery pieces, 6 artillery pieces. I've got 2,000 supply there, 1,000 supply there. Upgrade each. Can we buy another artillery piece? So that's 3, so that's 6. Local black market, could not care less. Yeah, there's no real difficulty here now. So as I said, you do really get to a steamroll point after a while. Just by sheer victories over and over and over again. Just give me more supply. Just give me more supply, my dudes. So, we'll call it here. Well, let me upgrade this one more before we do another fun of we start with tomorrow's mass offensive. Major loss, eh? And one more turn. Why are you doing one more turn? Because I want to start tomorrow with a mass offensive. Yay, that worked well. Okay, so we'll call it here, boys. But as you can probably tell, you can probably from how many hours of recording I've done now, you can probably tell what sort of game this is. It has some really good points. It's probably the only RTS game set in World War One that I've ever seen ever. So that's already putting it in a pretty high spot compared to, because it's got nothing really to compare it to. The strategy itself is very positional and very attritional. As you probably noticed, you really get put into that Great War mindset of just throwing troops at a problem and heavy artillery bombardment until the enemy is worn down into a nub. But it has issues such as the growing snowball of victory, which can allow you to just sort of auto-resolve your way to victory, and also the issue of course, having to constantly retake the same territory over and over again. And some OP mechanics, but altogether it is a pretty fun game. It sort of straddles historical realism with enjoyment of gameplay, and the slow progression from the futile offensives at the start of the game eventually leads to sort of mass saturation tactics, and you do understand, and it does sort of pseudo-realistic in regards to the change of warfare from the start of 1915 all the way to sort of 1917, 1918. Of course, there are some game mechanics that I do not agree with, such as how obviously OP tanks are, and it has to sort of straddle that progression from, otherwise you just end up from 1916 saturation tactics to 1917 saturation tactics, but with the odd tank that somewhat does okay, but normally breaks down. So I understand why they went with sort of the OP game. They've had to gamify a lot of things, but there's some things I would like more, such as the persistent destruction and persistent bodies. I know perhaps some rigs would not be able to handle it, but I'd like that as an option. And I would also like the change in the mechanic to the sort of taking of objectives. It's a fun game. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. It will get a little bit repetitive unless you LARP as the Allies trying to break through and trying to do offensives, or unless you LARP as the Germans. There's a very easy way to break the game, but the AI is adequate enough to be somewhat of a challenge. However, some of the innate nature of the game mechanics can render this game a bit trivial towards the mid to late game, which hopefully patches will fix. But as the game is not an early access game, there's no indication whether or not this will ever be improved upon. I think it's a pretty good game for what it is. It's a game that has been attempted to recreate World War I and has somewhat been successful. Has attempted to get the World War I feel, which I feel has somewhat been successful, but has fallen down in some of its more gaming mechanics in terms of causing the player to be invested. So I would say it's around a 7 out of 10 for strategy. Still, we'll continue this on tomorrow, probably get to the end of our campaign soon, because we're going to slowly start wearing down the Germans in the north with our copious siege artillery. Probably just going to keep on breaking through to Ghent and here until we get to Brussels, but that's going to take a while to break. Still, we'll try and break Brussels anyway, because why not? Just for the LARP of it, and we'll see how we go. Probably next research slot will be more troops, so we can station that line, because we're going to keep on trying to punch through to Brussels, which is going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, about 6 turns to actually break through on, which is a tad irritating, but hey ho. Do I have any elite troops I want to move forward? Nope. There's some elite troops here we can move up over to the north, but that's British. I want elite British troops. Give me elite British troops. Sadly not, but we'll see. Anyway, we'll call it here. Thanks for watching, boys. I hope you've enjoyed me being back, and we'll hopefully do some live streaming of this, or potentially Hearts, not Hearts of Iron 4, Company of Heroes 3. Still, have a good one. Adieu.